Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Gavinsky's Tutorials. Today I'm taking a look at an app that I've really fallen in love with actually over the past few days. It's called Latch, sqsl Latch, and I'll put a link to it in the pinned comment. I've also got 5 copies of this to give away. Actually, there may be a chance to win the other sequencer by this developer as well, but at the moment that is not confirmed. So all the details will be in the pinned comment at the top of the YouTube comment section. And by the way, if you're trying to enter these giveaways that I do on YouTube, I would strongly recommend that you follow me on Twitter and Insta as well if you use those platforms, because the chances of winning there are actually much higher, by the way. So anyway, good luck, everyone. All the details are in that pinned comment. I don't like to waste a lot of time talking about that in the YouTube video. Um, so this is designed to be specifically for using with drones, soundscapes, sort of textured stuff, basically experimental things. And why it's called Latch is basically because it focuses on playing sustained notes and getting lovely drone sounds and nice textures and things going. So, of course, how well it does that will really depend on uh, what you're playing with it. So, you're going to want to spend a bit of time getting sounds that are suitable and adjusting your attacks and decays and stuff like that. You'll probably mostly want to be using more pad type things, and then maybe some things that sort of cut through the mix a little bit more. So in today's video, I'm going to first give you a very brief overview of the main principle behind this and how it works. Then we're going to play around with it a little bit and see what it can sound like. And I'm going to show you how to set everything up in AUM so that you can not only receive note messages in the right places, but also, control, for example, effects apps or parameters in the synths themselves with various types of CC messages and stuff that this can send out. And you can manipulate the values of those CCs manually, or you can automate it. There's really nice things you can do. When you see this in action and all the lovely lights and stuff flashing, you're going to really like it, I think. So we'll look at how to set that up in AUM because, it wouldn't be obvious to everyone. And if you don't know how to use AUM well, by the way, I would strongly recommend checking out my Almost Everything You Need to Know About AUM video. It's about an hour long and covers really all the essentials that you need. Okay, so we'll look at how to set up AUM properly. And then I'll just finish with a brief summary of what I would like to see changed or added here and what I like about it. Okay, so let's first just explain the basic principle. So if we look first of all at the top, we have a little bit of information here about the scale we've chosen. Now we can choose our scale using the setup menu. We've got a bunch of different scales there. And we can also see here, it says channel 1. Now that refers to this because this is highlighted here. So this whole kind of brown colored keyboard, that is basically, we can call that group A. So it's a group because it's not even just notes that we're controlling over here. It's other things as well, like a bunch of different CCs and everything that are all connected to that and all going out in the same channel as those notes. And so then we have group B, and that's sending out on channel 2. And you can see here it says AUM, that's our destination. I'll show you later how to set those kind of things up. You'll have to forgive me for clearing my throat. I'm still recovering from COVID. And then we have bank 2, you see. So actually we can like control up to 16 different synths if we want. And you know, we could, like I'm doing here, I'm mostly using different synths, but you know, you could play, for example, of several instances of a monophonic synth and turn it polyphonic, or you could you know, have the same synth with different presets. Or another, I think, really cool way to play with this would be take basically the same patch in one synth, open up a few instances, and then tweak things a little bit to just get a little bit of variety with the filters and stuff like that. You know, you can get a lovely kind of unified, but at the same time slightly different sound there. You know, you could have like different attack and release on different instances and so on. I mean, there's, you know, a lot of possibilities really for what you could do. So that's the basic principle there, and everything's nicely kind of color coded. And we also have this, when we click on these things here, we can see that a sort of submenu opens up over here, where we have certain CCs that are kind of baked in. So, you know, mod wheel, that's CC1, pitch bend messages, volume control, clock. So basically, that's a value from 1 to 27, determining the speed of playback of the loops that we can record for each of these groups. This loop thing, this Midi loop thing, is a very cool little feature. It's got a mutate function as well, which is really nice. Expression CC11, pan, what is that? 7, is it? Ten, yeah. Foot controller, I think that's 14. Then range, that is a thing within the app itself that we'll talk about later. And here we have different CC sliders for each group. So each group has, at least each group in bank 1, bank 2 doesn't, because there would be far too many CCs there. There aren't enough CC numbers. So we can see that this first slider is basically sending out on channel 1, right? Because it's group A, CC22. This is sending out CC23, etc. If we change this here, then we're changing the value, right? So now it's, get it up here, it's going to be sending out 127 and so on. So this, you know, here, this slider will be sending out CC30 on channel 2 and so on. So this is why it's really important to make sure that you set AUM up properly to take full advantage of this. Okay, so let's just start with a little play. So this one I'm just going to leave on a little basic drone. I'm going to bring that volume down a little bit. Go back to the notes thing. Now here I'm going to record in a little loop. So let me explain. Or let me just show you. Now if I press record, it's going to start recording this. And if I then depress that, it'll start playing it back. Now, because I had this pressed, it will play it back exactly the same way that I played it in. But But if I press clear here, it'll clear all these notes and it'll clear this loop. And this time I'll record a loop, but with this D pressed, and we'll see what happens. So I then depressed that. Now it's starting to play them back, but it's playing them back in a random order. Check what is going on here. Okay, there we go. So now we could do things like go in and automate the volumes. Might want to just keep one stable as a kind of ground. We could play with pitch bend. Could automate that. And we can use this range to control how much that'll be allowed to wander. You see here now it doesn't have that much range. Here we can control the speed. So this is called the lag control. Unfortunately, for it to take effect, you have to turn off the automation first. And now you see it's moving much faster. If I bring up this range, you can see now everything's moving faster. Well, actually, only if we press these. So yeah, I actually understand there is a point to why this latch slider, I didn't really get this before, why it doesn't actually work immediately, because you may not want to apply it to everything. Like, let's say, for example, I want these ones to move a bit slower, but I want this one to keep going fast. Then I can press these and they've all slowed down, but this one's still going fast. So actually that makes a lot of sense. It didn't really get the way that had been implemented until now. Panning again, we could automate. Maybe keep one or two unautomated. Again, you know, we could change the range amount. Right? So you get the idea. So let me just go back to the notes thing and press clear for each of these. And that'll clear out the notes and the loops that we made. Now I will look at some of the things that I haven't mentioned yet and maybe recap from time to time some of the things that we already mentioned. So we already talked about the record function and the way it's important whether you have this lock enabled or disabled when you record. You don't have to record anything. You can just play all the notes in manually. You know, it's multi-touch, so you can play as many notes as you've got fingers at one time. One nice way to play is to maybe press one note that you've already got latched while you press another one to just unlatch one while you latch the other. That can be pretty cool. And so then we've got our CC here. So on this one, this CC is going in and changing the frequency here. Let me automate it. So I can press to sort of pull it down here and then it'll start wandering around. If I go to range, I can give it a very large range. If I change this and depress this and press it again, now it's moving around very fast. Now, one thing is, at the moment, this app doesn't work properly when it's not in the foreground. But the dev, I told the dev, look, seriously, this is really, really not ideal at all. And I mean, that's an understatement for people who are like real iPad-based musicians. Because the problem is, you see that the way the dev himself has been using the app is basically using his iPad as a MIDI controller. to control his desktop synths and stuff like that. So in that kind of situation, he would always be keeping it in the foreground, right? So it wouldn't matter. But if you're like most of us, more um, totally iOS-based musicians, or even just anybody who's kind of going to be triggering instruments on the same iOS device, then they're going to need to come out of the background. So anyway, I mentioned this to him, and like right away, boom, went in, and there's already been a new update submitted to the App Store. So very soon it will function completely perfectly in the background. And that is going to be brilliant, because that'll mean that you can actually, record all your loops and everything in here, get nice patterns going. Then you can come back in here and, all those things will still be running, the volumes or whatever. If you've automated those, they'll be moving around. But you can go in to your synths and tweak things on the fly while the loops are playing. At the moment, the loops, if you go out of background, or if you take this out of the foreground and it goes into the background, it'll stop playing the loops. It'll just kind of freeze on the notes. Whatever CC values it's sending out at that time that you switch away from the screen, that's just sort of what it'll freeze at after about a second or so. And it'll be stuck there until you go back. And then it'll come back and end up with new values. So anyway, update is already submitted to the App Store. So don't worry about that. That's a complete non-issue now. Okay. Then we press here, okay, and we have these different sub menus that we already talked about. So what you'll see here is that at the moment, 2 of them are range, and that's just simply because anytime you change this to something over here, that slot will get the name of basically the last thing that you pressed here. So now it's pan, but now we got another pan here. So maybe we want to change that pan to, let's say, bend or whatever. So we kind of have 3 of these that are always a bit more easily accessible over on the left-hand menu here. Okay, we've talked about the CCs already. Let's look at setup. So here this was set to C harmonic minor. And now we come into one criticism or suggestion for improvements that I have for the app. So first thing is, you select different scales by clicking on these. And I mean, it's nice that it shows the number, because I mean, obviously C chromatic, that, plays all 12 notes in the octave. C major and C minor both play 7 notes, etc., etc. But how are you really supposed to remember, unless you're using the app a lot, where the hell C blues major is or whatever? So that's one thing. So I mean, like a drop-down menu or something here would honestly probably make a lot more sense to me. Next thing is, like, there are a lot of weird scales in here. I mean, I've never heard of that. Hadn't heard of this. This is like a variation on Phrygian. But you see, it has this, but it doesn't actually have just normal standard Phrygian, and I find that a bit weird. So I feel that, first of all, there's a need for maybe a drop-down menu or something, or that they actually have their names here, or I don't know. And then the second thing that I would like to see is an ability to make custom scales, so that you could have, for example, a little keyboard here, and you just select the notes that are in the scale that you want to quantize to, and then maybe save it with a name or whatever. So if we had something like that, we would also maybe need some buttons here that could maybe like scroll up, because we wouldn't have enough space here. We would need to be able to make other things like this. But again, it would all get very hard to keep track of what's where, when you don't have a drop-down menu and you don't have names and stuff. So this scale thing is not really ideal for me. Now here you can select the color for each group. I'm happy leaving them the way they are. Here you can change the CC numbers that each of these sliders sends out on. So let's just say you want that to send out on 35 instead of 22. Well, you just change it up there. It's a little bit fiddly. A little bit fiddly. Output save. So here, at the moment, the only way I have managed to get it to actually make sound in AUM is to send it out on AUM MIDI output, but it does have other options here, session 1 and latch virtual output. But I have tried those in AUM. I mean, like they both appear here as sources, but actually when you select them, they don't seem to work. So I got an email from the dev earlier, and he did mention that, yeah, there's maybe a bug or something there. So perhaps that'll be fixed. But anyway, it doesn't really matter because at the moment you can use AUM destination. So that's fine. If you don't see AUM here, the reason could be that, for example, maybe you opened this app. Let's say the first time you buy this app and you open it, and let's say if you haven't got AUM opened, then AUM will not appear here as an output option. And then you can press this refresh button, and then hopefully it should pick up AUM and you'll be able to select it as your destination, right? And then here, this is just the bank 2. We can change all these for bank 2. When this is turned off, then it's dealing with bank 1. So I think that's everything in setup, okay? Trying to think, is there anything else? We've already talked about, this automation. Actually, I've never really paid attention to. Okay, so this one, yeah, it just actually brings it right down to the bottom. It doesn't automate it or anything like that. Okay. So again, remember that if you've got things going at different speeds, this one is going slower than that one. If we want this one to go faster, then we're going to have to turn this off and turn it on again. Actually, does really make a lot of sense that, yeah, it's very good. Okay, so I think we have covered basically everything within the app there. Just one thing to mention, you can use these buttons to move up or down octaves and stuff. So now let's look at how we set up AUM correctly, and this is really super key. So here I choose AUM destination. Now remember, this is what we're going to use to send notes in, okay, MIDI notes, not MIDI CCs. So we choose AUM destination here. By default, when you open up a new channel in AUM, it will basically accept information from all channels. So the easiest way to change that is to just press none and then press 1 here. And so now this is receiving on AUM destination channel 1, here channel 2, etc., etc. So we go through like that and set up a different channel for each one. Now, when it comes to CCs, okay, we let's say I want to, as I'm already doing, control the frequency slider here, and I want to control it with group A. Let's just say this first CC slider, which is sending out on 22. I open this up and click here. Now again, here I've got to make sure that AUM destination is selected. Here I need to open up all the different channels for the channels that I want to send CC messages on. So I'm only using 5 channels to do that. So I've turned on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I turn any of these off here, they'll be turned off in all of the different channels there. Okay, so now there are 2 ways we can do things. We can scroll through the list and just find manually what it is we want to change. So here, frequency, and then we just click on it and put in the appropriate channel and CC number for the slider that we want to use in Latch to control that. Or remember that in a recent update, AUM got this nifty feature where you press this little thing and then you press on something that you want to control and it'll automatically find it in the list. And then you can put in the channel number and the CC. And this is really useful for some synths that have just like literally hundreds of different parameters, and going through them is an absolute nightmare. So it's great that it has that. Yeah, so make sure, you really got to pay attention to, you're choosing AUM destination here. You're opening up all the channels that you're going to need for the whole session, and that you have chosen the right channel and the right CC number for the slider in the app. Super, super important. Now, if you want to control panning, then you're going to have to open panning nodes in these because they're not there by default. They're in stereo processing, stereo panning. Open that up. I've already got one open. When we tap on it, again, we get this little sort of EQ symbol, and we click on that, and here just again, make sure that you're receiving on the right channel and CC10 for pan. If you want to control volume, then you click down here on the bottom of the channel. It's all a bit convoluted, isn't it? And go into channel controls and just check that volume is set to channel 1 for this channel and CC7, and here it'll be channel 2 and CC7. Now that one, as far as I remember, is actually set up in AUM correctly by default, so you don't actually have to do that manually. Another thing that you need to remember, by the way, when you're using basically any kind of MIDI controller with any sort of app or whatever on your iPad, remember that this information is basically only going one way. So if I change this here, it is going to change this, right? Pay attention to where that is. You see how it's moved? But if I change this, it's not going to do anything to change this, right? So when you go in and you want to start playing around with a session like this, you are going to have to pay a bit of attention and first go into this app and adjust your volume levels, etc. in this app, not in AUM. Adjust your panning in here, not in AUM, because when you're playing around inside this app and doing everything in here, if you haven't set things up correctly first, then when you make a change, you may get sudden unwanted jumps in your values that won't sound good. Right? So that's how we set those things up there. And so now, basically, let me just grab my phone because I made a little list earlier, which I also sent on to the dev, just to remind myself and for him to mention all the things that I think are needed for this app to be as good as it can be. So one thing we already talked about already, and that is, the scales. So really would like to see custom scales, would like to see maybe drop-down menu or something for scale names, maybe Scala import. I was thinking earlier, why can you not choose the root note here? But the thing is, you see, it's connected to this grid system, right? Because, uh, you know, like a C chromatic scale, for example. Okay, let's just pop out of this and let me just change this um, to a C chromatic scale and go to notes here. Um, I mean, here, for example, it starts with, the C, and then we got our C sharp D, da 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 da. But, the next C will be over here, and so on and so on. So because every scale has a different number of notes in it, but because they all have to fit to this grid, it doesn't actually really make sense to have the keys, different keys at the beginning of each grid, I guess, anyway. I don't know, I haven't really thought it through, but earlier I was kind of thinking it'd be nice, and it would be pretty normal, right, in most apps to not just be able to choose your scale, but to be able to choose the key. But I guess it's connected to the way things are set up here. Now, what I do think is badly needed, and it kind of blows my mind really that it's not there, is that there's no kind of preset system whatsoever in this. So when you close this down, like let's say you've set up a session that you have everything exactly the way you want with all the panning, you know, and all being automated the way you like it and the volume and everything else. Well, when you close this app down and open it up, none of that is saved. Uh, no notes that you have entered are saved. No loops are saved. Nothing is saved whatsoever. This is madness to me, quite honestly. I mean, you can look at it from a certain point of view that this is, putting you in some sort of Zen thing. I don't know, like one of these Tibetan sand paintings, nothing lasts forever, blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. But like seriously, um, preset saving functions are just so useful. It can be tedious to have to set these things up again and again. I mean, okay, fine if you want to, treat that as an exercise and like learning patience and mindfulness, etc. Okay, great. But I'm kind of impatient, and I don't know. I think most users would seriously like a preset system here. So there should be a system where you can save presets with a name, um, and it saves, all the current state of the app, remembers your loops that you've got recorded, remembers slider positions, remembers the way you've got your range set up, and so on. Ideally, there would also be the ability to import and export presets, both singly and batched. Anything with preset menu should always have batch menus. Like I was looking, for example, at Blease Megalith, no, sorry, Monolith today. There's no batch preset import as far as I can see. If I'm wrong, someone correct me. You want to, someone sends you a preset pack for that, like someone tried to do for me earlier. I would have to put them all in one by one. Very tedious. Okay, ability to play in the background, that's already coming, so let's not worry about that. But again, it's a bit inconsiderate. I would say that it wasn't there. But anyway, definitely not going to hold it against the dev because he's been very gracious in very quickly adding that feature, so that's brilliant. But another big one, ability to receive MIDI clock and or Ableton link. And again, just to Jonathan, the AUM dev, AUM, I don't know, why can it not receive MIDI clock? Why can it only send MIDI clock? If AUM could receive MIDI clock, at least that would help a bit. But I don't know. I mean, the way the whole clock thing is set up in here with this sort of going from 1 to 27, sorry, 1 to 127, rather than being based on BPM, maybe it just doesn't fit into the whole concept. So I don't know. So, maybe no MIDI clock, no Ableton link, whatever. Maybe it's not the end of the world. I mean, I've still had a lot of fun playing around with this. But good luck trying to set things to beats or whatever without any kind of proper clock being able to go both directions. Then the other thing that I had written down was that I thought you should be able to change the lag time, and things that were automated would immediately change. But as I said during this video, I really realized, no, it's actually very good that it doesn't work like that, because it allows you to set up different lag times for different sliders. So, let's say this one, again, I should look at this a little bit in the video, but let's say, let me bring it down actually to a very fast one. Let's say I want this going super fast, but then I want this one going slow. Then I just bring this up to a slow one and automate this. And now this is going slow and this is going fast. And then let's say I want this one to go like absolutely super fast. Just bring this down here and now automate it. So this is actually a very good implementation. Yeah. And that's it really. I love this thing. I think it's brilliant. Being able to play around with stuff like the pitch bend. I don't know. I've always loved this idea of just one kind of little interface where I could really do everything. And really, you can just, as long as you set your AUM session or whatever up correctly, first of all, you can just come in here and like really, really get lost in it. It's just beautiful. I mean, it's a beautiful meditative experience to play this. It's just a lovely MIDI instrument. It really is. And I love the design of it. I love the aesthetic. As we mentioned, this sort of grid thing doesn't work that well for the scales, but it looks beautiful. And I love the color schemes, and I like just the attention to detail of, allowing you to pick your own colors for things like that. And, just the way everything looks really when they're being automated, and you just got these different colors bouncing around here. I mean, it's just beautiful. So it can kind of scratch that modular itch a little bit. We were talking in the Audiobus forum the other day. People a lot of time. Who's that guy? Synth punk. Okay, yeah, controversial character. I don't know. He had one video that made me laugh. A couple of others I felt, but he's sort of like the people against modular type thing. um, but if you've got some kind of gas for some flashing lights that kind of might remind you of a nice modular setup, maybe you can just spend $20 on this instead and not bother spending hundreds on Eurorack or whatever, or hundreds, thousands, I should say, tens of thousands. That said, as many people have been discussing recently, iOS is definitely not always the cheapest hobby. It sounds very cheap in theory, but when you buy every app that comes out, it can really rack up. And especially recently, as we've been getting more desktop developers porting to iOS, some of them at fairly eye-watering prices by iOS standards. Um, yeah, for some people, it might be cheaper to just get a few pieces of hardware and stick to that. I don't know. But anyway, beautiful interface. I think there's a lot of things that have been very, very well thought through. Just really need the preset menu in particular, I think would be my biggest ask, and a few of those other things that I mentioned earlier. But really beautiful app, and I'm really looking forward to checking out the developer's other sequencer now that I've got to grips with this one. All right, everyone, if you enjoyed this, do please give it a thumbs up and so on. If you like iOS music, and increasingly there are so many desktop ports that a lot of my videos also cover desktop plugins, even if I'm looking at them on an iOS device. So I do think that there's more value here for desktop users than there would have been a couple of years ago, for example. Well, subscribe to the channel. Like I say, I often have giveaways, and make sure that you're following me on Twitter and Instagram if you use those to have more chance of winning, especially if you're broke at the moment, like most of us are, right? And if you're not broke, then please do throw a nice PayPal donation my way if you like my work. I'd really appreciate it. Okay, everyone. Hope you enjoyed the video, and see you in the next one. Take care.